Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 13th of April, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information easily by calling 1-800-472-0391. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and once you click that, you'll go to weather.gov/Fairbanks, weather.gov/Anchorage, or weather.gov/Juneau. You can also find links to the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. That's weather.gov/AAWU for short. And of course, if you're looking for earthquake or tsunami warning information, you can always find that at the National Tsunami Warning Center. An easy way to remember that is just type in tsunami.gov. As far as email questions, and I've had a few from you folks today, so thanks a lot. I'd love to see your pictures. If you can snap a picture of your village, I'd love to share that and show what things are starting to look like there as we move into breakup fairly quickly for many communities around Alaska. And if you've just got a picture of the snow that's still there or the sunshine that's hanging above, yeah, let's share that with the rest of the folks watching Alaska Weather. nws.ar.tv weather at noaa.gov is a way to reach the entire team, or if you'd like, just david.snider. You have to use my full name. Call me like my mother would. David.snider at noaa.gov. That'll get me too. All right, let's take a look around Alaska, because why not? The sun is out. There are a few clouds. And check this out on the FAA camera there in Barrow. Can you see it? One of my favorite things. Look at that. There's a halo and a sundog right there. The temperature was about 18 degrees this afternoon in the lovely downtown area of Barrow there and at the airport. So hopefully all you folks in Barrow are doing well today. Around Galena, let's head a little bit further south. The sun was out at the airport there, 48 degrees looking west from the Galena camera there. Beautiful day in Galena. Just about full sunshine it looked like. A few more clouds out to the west. As you get down toward King Salmon though, in Bristol Bay, 55 degrees the high temperature today. A beautiful day in King Salmon and Bristol Bay. And once again, a little bit further out to the west is where we started to see a few more of those clouds. You can see maybe a little bit of a haze or some of that marine layer hanging in just on that low end of the horizon there. This is again a look to the west. Let's take one more trip and a stop down in Ketchikan. Check that out. The water looks relatively flat, not too bad. 61 degrees in Ketchikan, one of the warmer spots in Alaska today, in the lower 60s in southern Alaska and in the southern part of southern Alaska. So, wow, what a gorgeous day all the way around. There were some exceptions, of course. As you get out toward the Pribilofs, perhaps St. Lawrence Island, probably the pick of where I would say the weather was maybe not as nice as it could be today. Gamble and Savunga, you had periods of rain and snow throughout the day in a steady southerly fetch that kept the clouds and the wind right over you. Well, for many in Alaska, that just wasn't the tale today. For the central and northern parts of southeast, for south central, Kodiak Island again. Wow, talk about a Chamber of Commerce day there at Kodiak Island and all the surrounding islands and villages there. Just a gorgeous day. Lake Iliamna all the way up into most of the Yukon Valley, in fact, looked to be cloud-free. The North Slope, well, we had some low clouds hanging around. A lot of that seemed to be high clouds on the Barrow camera, though, didn't it? And we know that if we see a halo or a sundog or a glory, any type of those types of atmospheric optics, we know it's high clouds that are doing that. The tiny little ice crystals reflect and refract, that bends and bounces back that light and changes the way it looks to us before it ever gets to our eyeball. So pretty cool stuff. And as I've always said to folks that come visit us at the National Weather Service office, or if I come into your classroom, Alaska is one of the most amazing places for atmospheric optics simply because of the sun angle and how it changes throughout the year. And in the wintertime, it's really good time to see some of those really cool features. Now, back to the weather at hand. Could go on all day about that stuff. Out across the west, we see the next wave working its way through the western chain. Here's the last one, and this is falling apart because we have this big clearing ridge of high pressure across the interior. This is falling apart and leaving behind a trail of clouds and some pockets of snow showers here across the west and northwest. That next wave moving across the Aleutians will pretty much set up to do the same thing. So we'll increase our southerly flow across the central and western chain tonight. This will fall apart. It will be replaced by a strengthening southerly flow. And once again, periods of rain and snow may find their way up the west coast and into the Bering Strait communities, probably more than anywhere else. Across southeast, you have a new friend just to your south. This is low pressure here south and west of Haida Gwaii. This is going to try and work its way northward as we go through time. So you're going to see a few more clouds if you're south of Sitka to Petersburg, Wrangell, Ketchikan, Annette, Klawock, Craig, and Hyder. Watch for that to build in. And as we go, it's not a terribly strong storm, but it is going to start to change the weather and get rid of the sun that you've seen for many days there. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but as they say, we're not in manufacturing here in the weather department, we're just in sales. Out across west, the western chain, you can see some pockets of rain and drizzle there around Kiska this afternoon. Low pressure south of the eastern Aleutians with high pressure trying to keep control of the Gulf. Here's our low pressure wave again that's stretching its control out across the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet region. Up north, saw some pockets of freezing fog as we saw on the weather camera just a few minutes ago around Barrow. It didn't seem to be reaching the airport, so that's good news. St. Lawrence Island and across the water into Russia, you saw areas of rain and snow throughout the day. Otherwise, clear and dry. Just beautiful stuff. High pressure up north tonight at 1,028 millibars. Some areas of freezing fog, mainly along the coast and probably offshore. Southerlies pick up across the central Bering Sea. Generally, the stronger winds will be just west of the Pribilofs and St. Matthew. Watch for a few areas of fog around Bristol Bay and westward, and then those spotty snow showers are possible around the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, and the Seward Peninsula through the Bering Strait and outside of Kotzebue Sound, maybe just grazing Point Hope. And then as we get into southeast, there's a few more clouds, but really that is about it for tonight. As we get into Friday, tomorrow, watch for a scattering of clouds across the upper Yukon Valley. Remember yesterday we were talking about a cold front dropping southward. There is still a disturbance that's trying to work its way southward, but it doesn't look to be as well put together as it was yesterday, so kind of erase that from the map, but the clouds are still there. And as we look out to the west, you see that stronger southerly flow with a tighter packing of pressure gradient lines here, the isobars over St. Matthew, the Pribilofs, and the eastern chain. So we'll see the strongest winds there. And then a wind shift to the west. And here comes a cold ball of air across the western chain, but not cold enough to really mix in the precipitation around that low, in fact. So watch for some rain to come in, but you might see a brief change over to rain and snow. Southeast still looking fairly dry and sunny, but by Saturday some changes. So if you need one more day to enjoy the sunshine in southeast, I'll sign your pass to your boss, take Friday off, and just say, hey, that guy on the weather show said it's going to be sunny. Got to enjoy the day. Saturday I'll come back to work. So just make sure you show up on Saturday and don't make me look bad. Out across the west, the Gulf of Anadyr all the way down toward the eastern chain and the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula will have a front working through. That pressure gradient is relaxing, so the winds should not be as stiff coming in from the south across the peninsula, across the western Capes, the YK Delta, Norton Sound, or the Bering Strait region. High pressure is back in control of the Gulf, but that has let a little bit of that wetter weather into southeast. And then across the upper Yukon Valley, what's this? It might snow a little bit. If you're an Eagle, Fort Yukon, or Arctic Village, there's an opportunity, a very low chance right now for a not very widespread and generally light snow showers, it looks like at this time. Does not look like it's going to reach Fairbanks for Saturday anyway. It's not in your forecast. The cold front is trying to, what's left of it, or what it seems to be, is a wave of cooler weather dropping southward. And if it can hold together, it may certainly create more clouds, and there's an even lower chance that it's going to create some snow. So something to watch for. This could increase in coverage and intensity, or it may completely fall apart. So we'll see about that trend tomorrow. So make sure you check in if you're concerned about snow in Arctic Village, Fort Yukon, or Eagle, or maybe even Fairbanks. Out across the central and western chain, 996 millibar low there, working its way toward Kiska and Shemya. We'll see some areas of light rain and drizzle with that, but nothing too substantial at this point. The main focus for weather will be across the west coast, and that too will probably start to fizzle out as we get into the rest of the weekend. Here's a look at temperatures today, as we already saw some warm spots down around Ketchikan and Annette today. Hyder was 57, Sitka 59, the capital city in the mid-50s. A beautiful day in Haines and Skagway and Yakutat at almost 60 degrees at 3 o'clock. 52 in Valdez, 56 in Cordova, 46 in Anchorage by mid-afternoon. Many parts of town had made it into the 50s. 52 around Homer, 56 for Talkeetna. Pentillo was 43, 46 around Fairbanks, 42 in Eagle, 41 around Northway. Fort Yukon had 39. Tanana was looking at temps in the mid-40s there. Ambler and Bettles also in the 40s. Arctic Village and Aktivik Pass both at 27. The North Slope mainly in the teens today. Kaktovik had 18. Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse in the mid-teens. Wainwright 14. It was in the 30s and 40s around Point Hope and out around Point Lay. Temps were in the mid-30s as you got into Kotzebue Sound. 39 in Shishmaref today, probably a melty kind of soggy day there in Shishmaref, I would imagine. 33 in Nome, 49 around Unalakleet. It was 47 in Galena. Low to mid-30s around St. Lawrence and Gamble and Savunga there, with rain and snow in the region once again. Around Southwest from McGrath, 48 down to Kuskokwim to 44 in Bethel. Lake Iliamna saw temperatures in the lower 50s. Kodiak Island in the 40s and 50s today. And then once you got into that southerly wind and the clouds, temperatures fell off pretty quickly. 30s and 40s for most of the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint was 39 on Alaska and Dutch Harbor, 43. The Pribilovs, low 40s. And anywhere from the upper 30s to low 40s for the central and western chain behind that front. So a big difference in weather where you were compared to that front today in that southerly wind. 30s for southeast tonight, lower to mid 30s for south central. In the valleys and lower spots, including Anchorage, Matanuska, and Susitna valleys, you might dip into the upper 20s, in fact. 37 around Kodiak. Upper teens and low 20s for the middle Tanana Valley to Healy and Fort Greely. Eagle 7, 14 for Fort Yukon, as well as Bettles. Single digits once you get across Anaktuvuk Pass and the North Slope there. Barrow looking at 7. Looks like Kotzebue, 19 degrees, 21 in Shishmaref, 28 in Nome, 26 for St. Lawrence Island. And around Bethel, 27 degrees, Bristol Bay in the upper 20s, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula and the chain, with high temperatures tomorrow back in the lower 40s. 40s and 50s for the southwest coast. Once you get into the interior, it should be warmer around McGrath, mid to upper 40s, maybe even 50 degrees for many. That should be what you see in south central, upper 40s and lower 50s. Once again, a gem of a day in Kodiak. Enjoy that one once again for me. 47 degrees southeast, also not left out of the sunshine fun. Lower 50s for many, and probably pushing 60 degrees once again, unless you start to see clouds moving in from the south, and that will cut back slowly on that southerly warm-up. Up north, teens for many across the North Slope, 13 in Barrow, let's say 15 in Wainwright, and low to mid-teens for Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse. Around Fairbanks, close to 50 degrees. Nome, 36, Kotzebue, 33, and Bethel should be a fair weather day for you, and 47. On to flying weather. IFR conditions continue for the North Slope in the morning. Here is the front, and behind that is IFR for St. Matthew, the Pribilovs, and the central chain. MVFR conditions are possible around Kodiak Island in the morning. Watch what happens by the afternoon. Poof, it's gone. Looks like a gorgeous afternoon. Around the western side of the Yukon Delta, all the way through St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, as well as parts of the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Watch for MVFR. IFR conditions there around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, mainly right along the coast, so you can get away from that. Should be okay. Here's your pass conditions. You can do this with me here. This is paint by numbers today. VFR conditions for Adigan, Anaktuvuk Pass, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. Rainy Pass and Windy Pass looking pretty good. Isabel Pass about as good as it can get. Mentasta Pass also looking fine. Tanita Pass, VFR conditions there. Portage Pass, VFR conditions. And 2 more. Chilkoot and White Pass, also A-OK. So enjoy that, fly safe. Freezing levels, you can see that warm air spreading out over the Gulf and being drawn northward once again across the central chain. Levels there as high as 4,000 feet over Adak and Atka. And around the lower and middle Yukon Valley and the upper Kuskokwim, levels as high as 2,000 to 4,000 feet. Over southeast, 2,000 to 4,000 feet there across the eastern Gulf. And a little bubble of warm air is trying to make its way up north. Oh, let's say around Barrow to Wainwright. Levels there at or maybe just below 2,000 feet in the region. So things are warming up. Icing potential above 7,000 feet across the Chukchi Coast into Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound. Above 8,000 feet for St. Matthew and the Pribilovs, and then above 8,000 feet for the western chain. What about the eastern interior, all the way from Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse down toward, let's say Arctic Village and Eagle? you can see there's still an opportunity for some light to isolated moderate there above 4,000 feet. But southeast, south central, most of the interior and southwest have no significant icing issues, it looks like, tomorrow. The jet stream is, again, our super highway of weather. And right now the highway crew has diverted all of the weather traffic across the west coast and the Bering Sea. And that just puts this all in a really kind of shutdown mode. High pressure's in charge of most of the Great Land, and with that we have a dry northerly flow working its way out into the Gulf, and thus all the sunshine. On top of that, high pressure is pushing down on the atmosphere. It makes it really hard for clouds to bubble up and form in that case. And so for southeast, the super highway of weather has been diverted away from you as well, and you can see that's mainly down to the south and working its way into the west coast, even out of the way of a large part of the Pacific Northwest, in fact. So really active weather is away from most of the majority of the interior, south central, and even southeast at this point. At 9,000 feet, you can see our winds are fairly light across the interior. We have a north and easterly flow for the Beaufort Seacoast, about 10 to 20 for southeast. Light winds, 5 to 10 right now, more of a south and easterly flow working up the north and eastern Gulf. Weak low pressure in the heart of the Gulf, and here's our stronger flow. West and southerlies working their way across the chain and into the Bering Sea over the Pribilof, some of our strongest winds seen here at about 50 knots. At 3,000 feet, southerlies are going strong across the west, anywhere from 20 to about 45, even 50 knots over the Pribilofs again. Across the western and central chain, 30 to 50 knots there. High pressure is maintaining weak winds and steering them in all sorts of directions across south central and southwestern Alaska and southeast, 5 to 10 there for you. More of that offshore flow continues throughout the day at 3,000 feet. Easterly is moving a little faster across the central and eastern Brooks Range, 15 to 25. And we have stronger southerly winds out across the YK Delta, 15 to 20 there, a little bit stronger as you head out over St. Lawrence Island. Turbulence potential then is going to be focused primarily out across the YK Delta, Nunivak Island, the Pribilof, St. Matthew, St. Lawrence Island, around the Bering Strait region, and then really everywhere from Cold Bay and False Pass or just west of Sand Point to below 4,000 feet. Watch for some occasional to widespread moderate there thanks to the stronger southerly winds, and those stronger winds around the Juneau area tomorrow should be a little bit better. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'm back with a sea ice edge and your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Let's go fly a kite. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
Springtime is known for great kite flying weather. And coincidentally, there is a constellation visible after sunset that looks surprisingly like a kite.
That's right, James. This week, we're going to talk about the constellation Boötes the Herdsman and give you some information about some of its brightest stars.
Let's show you. Okay, we have our sky set for an hour after sunset facing northeast, where we see the Big Dipper high above the North Star. If its cup was full of water, it'd be pouring into the Little Dipper and overflowing onto me.
If we shoot an arrow through the two stars on the end of the Big Dipper's cup and continue that line, it'll run smack dab into the North Star.
Now, let's use the Big Dipper's handle to find Boötes. Simply draw an imaginary line through the handle of the Big Dipper and extend it out along the curve, or arc, and you'll arc your way to the bright star Arcturus.
Arcturus is the brightest star in Boötes the Herdsman and has the unique distinction of being the fourth brightest star in the night sky. The brightest star is Sirius, number 2 is Canopus, and number 3 is Alpha Centauri.
Johann Bayer used Greek letters, Alpha through Omega, and then A through K to label the 35 most prominent stars in Boötes. John Flamsteed later increased this number to 54 stars.
Good luck finding all those stars without a super dark sky. Nevertheless, 8 of those stars are easily visible to the naked eye, and the 6 brightest ones are even visible from a city.
Those stars form a kite-shaped pattern. Their names, traveling counterclockwise from Arcturus, are Rho Boötes, Sejanus, Neckar, Delta Boötes, and Izar. The 2 stars hanging off either side of Arcturus, making a tail for the kite, are Muffred to the west and Zeta Boötes toward the east.
Arcturus got its name from an ancient Greek word that meant guardian of the bear. This makes sense since the constellation of Boötes is right next to Ursa Major, the Great Bear.
Arcturus is almost 37 light years away from us and is a red giant star about 110 times brighter than the Sun. It is also estimated to be slightly larger, mass-wise, than the Sun, and between 6 billion and 8.5 billion years old.
Polynesian navigators called Arcturus Hokulea, the Star of Joy. And from Hawaii, Arcturus became known as the Zenith Star because it passes almost directly overhead, as seen from Hawaii, near midnight in the last few days of April.
And if you like asterisms, we have a spring triangle to show you using Arcturus, Regulus, and Spica. Regulus is the brightest star in Leo the Lion. You can find it using the two stars Megrez and Phecta, which are in the bowl of the Big Dipper closest to the handle.
By drawing a line from Megrez through Phecta, you will eventually run into the head of Leo the Lion, which resembles a backward question mark. The dot of the question mark is Regulus.
The next star, Spica, is easy to find using our arc to Arcturus trick. By continuing the line from the Big Dipper's handle through Arcturus, you'll speed over to Spica, the brightest star in Virgo the Maiden.
So by drawing a line from Regulus to Spica and over to Arcturus, you can make the spring triangle. Now granted, it is a big triangle.
And for you planet watchers, Jupiter is in a great location not far from Spica. It is just to the west of Spica, and through a small telescope, you can see its 4 largest moons: Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto.
Jupiter and Earth were at their closest last week, so Jupiter should still look impressive, even in a small telescope. So, get outside and check out the kite-shaped constellation of Boötes the Herdsman with its bright star Arcturus.
And see if you can spot the spring triangle and the king of the planets, Jupiter.
It's all there waiting for you when you keep looking up.
No question about it, with the stronger southerly winds working over the Pribilofs, we are moving the ice northward, and we're also eroding that for the southern edge of the ice into more strips and pushing that main concentration above 80% that you see colored here in white further and further north. So big changes there. As we look at Friday and southeast, you're looking at northerly winds across the region. Look at 20 knots there or so around the Lynn Canal. Also through Stevens Passage with a 4-foot sea. Southeasterlies around Clarence Strait, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Light winds across the outer coast, 10 to 15. Seas ranging between 4 feet in the north and 6 feet outside of the Dixon entrance. By Saturday, wow, look at that. A few more clouds across the south, but winds are fairly light, generally southerly on the inside and the outside. Starting to move onshore now, though, coming into Cross Sound with 4 to 5 foot seas on the outside, 6 to 7 foot seas a little bit further south, and seas on the inside 2 to 3 foot there. So wow, Saturday looks pretty nice as far as marine weather goes in southeast. Northeasterlies will be fairly light across the north and western Gulf around Prince William Sound, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea, 3-foot seas on the outside, 15 knot winds across the western Gulf outside of Kodiak Island and east, 15 knots with a 6-foot sea. West of the Barrens, small seas, and in Shelikof Strait up to 4-foot seas with a northeast wind at 15. A little more easterly flow there on Saturday. Winds go light and variable around Prince William Sound and outside of Resurrection Bay. All the way down toward Homer, a little bit more of a south and easterly flow across the Barrens, and light northeast winds down Cook Inlet, even variable, with 2-foot seas across the northern part of Cook Inlet. So Saturday in South Central looking pretty good as well. As you look at the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, well, light winds, easterlies, 10 knots, 2-foot seas there around Bristol Bay. Northwesterlies also light from Castle Cape to Chignik. A little higher seas there along the Pacific coast, 6 to 7-foot seas there. Southeasterlies down the Bering Sea coast, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea there on Friday. Pretty much the same story on Saturday there. Light winds inside of Bristol Bay. Slightly stronger southeasterly flow down the Pacific coast, 15 to 20 with a 4 to 9-foot sea there on Saturday. For the Aleutians, we'll get into our south and westerly flow that strengthens a little bit here across Nikolsky to Adak. Looks like winds generally from the southwest around Adak and Atka, 30 knots with a 10 to 14 foot sea there. Southerlies out to the east, 30 knots or so with 8 to 9 foot seas around Nikolsky and Unalaska, and 14 to 20 foot seas out in the west. By Saturday, we get into a little bit more of a change across the central chain as that front is passing through. Northerlies settle in for Nikolsky and Unalaska for most of the day, 20 knots with a 7 foot sea, up to 10 foot seas on the south side with winds from the north and east. A little bit more of a west and northwesterly flow taking shape here from Nikolsky out toward Atka with 8 foot seas in the Bering, and then from 11 to 14 foot seas across the Pacific coast, and then 17 to 18 foot seas out in the west with a southwest wind at 25 knots. For the Pribilovs, look for a southeast flow on Friday, 11 foot seas on 30 knots. Southeasterlies continue everywhere else along the west coast and the Bering, 20 to 30 knots with 4 foot seas around the St. Lawrence Island region and 12 foot seas for St. Matthew. As we get into Saturday, the winds will change a little bit around St. Paul and St. George to northwesterly, 15 knots with a 9 foot sea. 4 foot seas around the Kuskokwim Delta. Easterlies for St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots with a 5 foot sea. And for St. Matthew, southerlies, 20 knots with a 11 foot sea for your afternoon there. Here's a look at the north slope. Broad easterly winds are going to start to take over more areas, and watch for these winds to pick up across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Remember, we were talking about that yesterday. If high pressure really starts to pack it in, it looks like that's going to happen with the winds picking up here. So watch for some advisories there. Also areas of freezing fog. Southerlies across the Chukchi coast, 10 to 15 knots there off of Cape Lisburne toward the Kotzebue Sound region. And then the easterlies went out for Saturday. You can see them pushing air off of Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, and outside of Kotzebue Sound, 20 knots there, 30 knots up toward Barrow, and then 35 to 40 for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. So brisk winds at least. So watch yourself there on Saturday. Here's a recap of tonight's weather. High pressure's in charge. There's that tight pressure gradient right there. It's already starting to pack in a little bit offshore. Out to the west, the winds coming in from the south for the central Aleutians as well as the central Bering Sea. The west coast looking at lingering clouds and maybe a spot snow shower. A few clouds around southern southeast. Otherwise, all clear for just about all of Alaska on Friday except for the west coast. A few snow showers for the Seward Peninsula, some pockets of freezing fog up north, and a few clouds for the northern interior. Out west, the next front moves across the Aleutians, changing the winds up as we go, and then throws on the brakes for Saturday. High pressures in the Gulf, a few areas of light rain for southeast, a few more clouds for the Yukon Valley, and a very slight chance of snow for places like Eagle and Arctic Village. That's a look at your Alaska weather. Thanks for watching. See you again next time.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.